Happy Thursday.
Thursday.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How have things been going with you? I feel like that's a $1 million question.
Every week it's like something new.
Being fun.
This week, actually, things are, knock on wood, starting yesterday. My dad is doing much better. He
Mhm.
has a tracheostomy, has a trach,
Yeah.
um, and a feeding tube, but he's slowly breathing independently, slowly. There are times where he has to get back on the oxygen. He's able to talk now, and he's in a interesting state of mind where I think for him, he's in a sense reminiscing on all of the things that he's done as a father and is starting to like talk about regrets in a
Yeah.
sense. My mom is, thank God, last night they started her first dose of chemo of like the stronger dose. They had stopped her for 2 weeks because the other one wasn't working and the cancer was just growing.
Mhm.
She's gotten a lot of bad news around it. They don't know. They told her that there's no way she's coming off of the feeding tube because her esophagus is damaged at this point and she won't be able to eat for the rest of her life. So she's trying to be a miracle on that. So she's doing everything she can for that to not become a reality. But the doctor said that's like she's never seen thyroid cancer go into an esophagus and the person be able to go back to being able to eat. But she's so up until yesterday, she was just getting worse. So we don't know starting today, but she's smiling. She's getting her hair done. She's keeping up with life. Um, she's doing an amazing job being strong. But you know what I've noticed, and I think that would be the topic of today, is how, because like I took her to the beach last week because she had her doctor's appointment and it was very, very sad for her that she
Mm.
felt very hopeless that
Yeah.
all of this happened to her. She had always taken care of her health, always taken care of herself, and now like they're telling her she's not going to be able to eat for the rest of her life. Um, and also like that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they can't shrink the cancer and she dies. That was literally what they told her. So I took her to the beach and I posted a video and because my mom's just like trying to release the anxiety and release the discomfort, everyone's like, "Oh my God, she looks so good. She's doing so much better. Oh my God, there's nothing wrong with her anymore." And then it's like, you want people to think that, but at the same time, it's so invalidating to a person's experience. And then on the other end with my dad, everyone's just like, "Oh my God, I hope he's doing so," because he's so visibly shows that he's not doing okay at the same time. Like, that everyone's like focus goes to him. And it really does. It made me feel a little bad for her. And you can tell in her face because no one's asking her how she's doing anymore because everyone's assuming she's doing good because
Yeah, because she appears good.
yeah, because she's trying to make sure her psychology stays optimistic. Because she understands, she's a very well-educated woman, so she understands like the way you think and the way you are is a big aspect of how health works. And not to say my dad is not an educated man, but psychologically he's not as strong, I guess, is the judgment.
Mhm.
So it's so interesting, and this happens even in our field, but it happens almost in all healthcare fields. Like if you want to psychologically keep going and stay strong and stay optimistic, people just assume you're okay.
I think it's like the ultimate dialectic, right? Of like being not okay and okay at the same time. And like I think that there's such a it's hard for people to tap into the dialectic that probably exists. I'm sure very much so. It seems like even the impetus to go to the beach was kind of centered around wanting to kind of help your mom through the hopelessness and the way that we appear and the way that we feel just being so different.
Yeah. And like, I think that's the piece where a lot of times I think if you appear sick, then you get more taken care of.
Yeah.
But if you are a person that like just doesn't that wants to take care of yourself but doesn't want to like be depressed, I guess. You want to make sure you stay um optimistic,
Yeah.
you don't get taken care of.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it really is something, it's a dialectic that I really hope people can I get it because when my mom was like so anxious and so worried and constantly being like, I'm losing weight. And she's telling me this because I'm her daughter, right? She's like, I'm losing weight, I'm worried. I can feel it hitting my trachea. I can feel it growing. Like I don't know what to do. And throughout the past couple of weeks, she's been like very scared. Um, it's been hard for me. Like for me, I'm like, just stop telling me. Like it's hard for me to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Um, but at the same time, each and every time I had to stop and be like, okay, no, she can't always be strong. She can't always be I'm fine because that's not valid.
Yeah. And it's not, and other people aren't hearing it at all, and you're hearing it as well. And so nobody also knows the depth of her suffering other than, honestly, other than the two of you, probably.
Yeah. And my brother.
Yeah. But I
Um,
think it sounds like very kind of very much like hard to probably hard to hear just such incompatible information of people being like, "Oh, she looks great." And you're like, "Ask her how she's doing."
yeah.
Because she looks good and like that's which is great, but it doesn't reflect what's happening and what's going on internally to be able to get there. And this is like I think really kind of a striking conversation just in the ways in which kind of appearance, performance, masking can
Mm.
end up kind of showing a very different picture of what someone's internal experience is.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing, people, and it comes from love, people wanting her to do better, right? Like they're just like, "Oh my God, I feel relieved. Like she's doing great. Thank God, Lily. Like thank God everything's doing great." Um, but I think and that's the piece where it really had me think a lot because there's so many people in this world that are like my mom, and no one's right or wrong in any shape or form. But there are so many people that if like they do everything to just stay optimistic and they do everything to keep taking care of themselves and they express that they're struggling, but it's like people call it as complaining because you're so optimistic.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, stop complaining. And it's like, are they complaining? Because if they are doing everything to take care of themselves, again, this woman was told she's not going to be able to eat for the rest of her life because of a mistake a doctor made. And she's still doing everything in her power to like try to make sure that her esophagus stays functioning, and like she's doing all these things and practicing all these different exercises and all these different things so she if so once this cancer is taken out, she becomes the exception to the rule and ends up eating. And then that's the thing where it's like, is she going to get credit for all of the things that she's doing? like,
I think it's so impossible to even understand like the reality of that conversation for most people. And of course, there's like a distancing that happens of like almost like it is something that kind of we see a lot of like it's so hard. And of course, wanting her to be okay. And it's hard to conceptualize being told either you're going to die or you'll never be able to eat again and live, and having like a kind of a huge change to your quality of life. So it's just, I think that there are so many things I think that we do to try to keep ourselves safe from these realities, because if we held all of the fear of all of the bad things that could happen, it'd be impossible to get through the day.
Mhm. Which that's the other thing. Like my dad is in this fear of like, well, I'm not going to be able to breathe on my own again, and I'm not going to be able to walk on my own again, and I'm not going to like, what's going to happen to me? And what did I do to myself? And what kind of life did I live? And it's so interesting to see both of them experiencing like a near death experience at the same time, and how it's so different from one another. And it really, and it's not just my parents, like it's so many people. It's like some people deal, most not, it's like the 50-50. Some people deal with it the way my mom does, some people deal with it with the way my dad does. And that's how humanity deals with near death experiences. And it doesn't matter male or female, like some people are going to say men can't handle it. Not really. It's not male or female specific. It's when you get close to death, these are kind of, some people are fighting and they're like, no, I'm not. It's not going to happen. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to keep being grateful for my life. I'm going to keep being grateful that I'm living. And then you have the other that are going down the route of like, all right, well, this is the end of my life. And what kind of life did I live? And that's so horrible. And it's like, and it's interesting. And the sympathy and the empathy does get pulled towards the one that's in a sense not given up, but in that state of sad realization, versus the kind of like, okay, she's fine, like the not avoidance, but it's like she doesn't need it, goes towards the ones that are more like they're fighters, I guess.
Mhm. It's different, like kind of orientations. And I think that you're right. Like, this is like, I think people like tend to make generalizations at times that could be gender specific, or like, something about trying to figure out what facet of the person predicts how they'll respond in pets in like kind of horrible situations, or in these moments. And it's like reaching, right, to say everyone will kind of have this response. When it comes to like, yeah, I think the different orientations people have, like I think that I wonder if it reflects kind of how both your parents are oriented in this moment in time to how they were oriented in their lives.
Mm.
Like, of just generally speaking, of like what it kind of draws out. Does it draw out something like your mom is always someone who fights, versus, I don't know if it's reflective at all of that.
Well, it actually is. And that's a really, really amazing point. Um, like my dad's family is very pessimistic. Um, and like, although my dad really did have ADHD, never treated, never to, and very intense, like strong, high acute ADHD. Um, his family was always teaching, like, if you sit within his family, they're always pessimistic. Everything is like, oh, why is God doing this? Why is everything like this? So, and we'd always say, why are the Galusians so negative? Like, why is everything so negative? Versus my mom's family, my mom's dad, my mom's mom could sometimes be pessimistic, and to say this with a lot of love, she's one of my favorite human beings and such an important figure to me, but she complained a lot and she was dramatic. She liked being dramatic about, like, at funerals, she was the one that was like crying, screaming, and I'd be like, how did you know this person? She's like, I don't know. It's like my daughter's friend's granddaughter. And it's like, bro, you don't even know this person, but you're like crying as if it's like, oh. But my grandfather on the other end was a pharmacist, he was a scientist. Everything was very logic and factual, and he taught my mom and also taught us a lot of how, like, your psychology affects your health and how you think affects the way you behave in life, and was very um and my mom, again, she like was a rebel. She went against her family to marry my dad. She fought her family to marry my dad. She fought against addiction to take care of like, she's been a fighter her whole life. So yeah, I think it does play a role in how you were raised for sure, and what people around you taught you how to think and believe. Yeah, it does come from that.
I feel like there's so much to like kind of how, yeah, how we've responded throughout our lives. And I think that there's, of course, like, what's better, like, who knows, like what causes less suffering. And, there's just, I think it has to, whatever it is, it has to be driven by what feels validating to ourselves. Of course, we can like know to some degree that there are certain things that make us feel worse. But I
Mhm.
think that it is person dependent. And I think that the ways in which we fight, and I think it's probably very true of like even as you see yourself in like moments of crisis of like of how we accept, fight, not accept, don't fight, like there are all those kind of different responses. So I think that this is like definitely natural. And I think as we're like the way that we like kind of engage with the world is like definitely like contextually like it really is like kind of based off of like that greater context in which we were embedded, how we responded to, and everyone also responds differently. Like um, uh, the same way that like the same place that like I grew up, like my sisters grew up, right? And like we can each all also respond differently, and
Yeah,
there's nothing kind of better or like worse about each of our responses, just how we do.
yeah. And it's very true. I think that's where part of it, which it's interesting because now that we're talking about it, a lot of my friends that have kids and their kids are at the like 3, 2, 3, 4 age range, and they'll always be like, "Well, why is this like why is this child different than that child?" And I'm always like, that is where you have to get to know your kid's personality. Personality is just what you're like, every personality is different. That's not genetics, that's not taught, that's not like, as they're growing, parts of the personality get like molded because of the environment. And they can go certain directions because of the environment, but the personality is a personality. If they're feisty, then they're fighters. You try to teach them how to be a fighter effectively and teach them the boundaries and the balances. If they like complain a lot, then they're pessimistic, and you teach them how to be pessimistic but also see certain things differently. Um and I think that's one of the things about humanity that I love. Like, I love people watching. It's one of my favorite hobbies because everyone's personality is so different, and you can't like, I don't, you might know more than this. There isn't a study about why personalities are so different and where personality develops from.
There definitely is like some literature out there about like kind of what are the things that factor into like kind of personality development, and there are definitely those contextual factors, right? Like there are the like environments in which we grew up, but like there are some things that are temperament, and I think that's like the difference of like thinking about the nature versus nurture. This argument is like kind of old as time, which is like what kind of causes people to be the way that they are. And the thing is that there's no one thing. And there are just temperament differences. And it's something even yeah, like that you see between yourself and your siblings, which is like a really easy one. Or even when I look at the two little weasels,
Mhm.
both have such different personalities. And I think that like there's some things that I think that you were talking about that we can kind of shape ourselves to be different, but there might be like kind of that core. that corresponds of like where I'm someone who just runs a little bit more anxious, right? And like somebody else may run differently than me. And like even like my sisters, like we actually all run anxious, but we all run anxious in different ways. And I think that those personality factors, like there are things like the thing that you were talking about of like the uniqueness of each of us is so important as we're having these conversations of like not wanting to try to shape everyone to be the same, mold them in the same way, but figure out what are the things that cause most people suffering and
Yeah.
how do we reduce suffering so that people can be themselves in their own way. Like a Bokikio family trait is like everyone in my family is like the biggest complainer. And like no judgment, like we just like kind of are.
No, no. Every
And
people
like
get to complain about life.
yeah. And I think it's like being able to like modify that. Like I know that if I call my sisters and complain like incessantly about like the like fact that like surgery for Poppy is going to cost $3,000, like there's an upper limit to like how much talking about that will help me.
Hmm.
Uh, and like a little bit, it's like kind of fun being like, I can't believe it's going to be this expensive. And then there's a certain point where it's like, actually, I'm just ruminating out loud and it doesn't feel validating anymore. So being able to modify accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's yeah, and especially like when I work with clients a lot of times, especially because I again borderline personality disorder, it's a bit of a dysfunction within the personality, and they call it a disordered personality. And a lot of times, once they're able to regulate from the criteria and the symptoms, and they're starting to like not show the symptoms as much, a lot of times that's when I'm like, okay, now you have to get to know your personality. Now you have to understand yourself for the self-love and the understanding of yourself to come up, and you have to understand yourself without judging yourself. Like if you notice you're a person that's like complains a lot, then that's part of your personality and you don't judge it, you just modify it. Or like, and the example I use a lot, I'm like, I'm a person that doesn't give up at all. Like giving up it's never been even a concept in my mindset, right? No matter if I played when I played sports, like we were down by 20 points and I was still the one that was like throwing myself on the floor. Like, no, even if 10 seconds is on the clock, I'm still giving everything I have until the last second where, and if I lose, I lose, but I'm not giving up until the last second. And I have to modify that because then I would get injured because I was trying to like do more than I should have because we were down by 20 points. It doesn't make a difference no matter how much you keep throwing yourself on the floor trying to catch a ball. But those are parts of your personality that you have to get to know. And that's the thing with my mom and dad. Like that's where I don't judge any of them going through what they're going through because obviously they're both like at the face of death in their own way. And how they're dealing with it, it's not my place to judge, it's not my place to advise, it's not my place to navigate. It's like my dad is going to deal with it in his own way and I accept that and I'm just going to be there, and my mom's going to deal with it her own way and I accept that and I'm going to be there. um but it really did bring such a sitting back and observing, because I'm not trying to fix because I can't. It's brought such an awareness to how people, and not just my parents, because it really is, everyone deals with this stuff so differently. And I love that you brought the attention to, because part of it is personality trait and part of it is how they grew up, what they were taught. Um, and it's true. And thank you. That was what was on my mind this couple of days.
I think naturally. And I think that being able to have I think the reminder for yourself and for other people of just what we see isn't always what is happening. And like, I think it's something that we can oftentimes overlook of being like, of thinking that, yeah, just like the external appearance
Yeah.
is representative of what the internal experience is. And it's just can be so vastly different.
Yeah, like look at me now. My external experience, I'm gonna assume, is calm, regulated.
Yeah.
But I will say both my parents are facing death. This is not like,
This is not like this isn't a typical moment in time, and it would be impossible, but I think that, like, somebody passing you by in the street would have no idea, and I think I think just further, like, further reminds of how little we do know.
yeah. And one of my ways of coping with life in these moments is just, it is going to like these philosophical places of just like, this is life. It's not just my family. It's not just my mom and dad. Like,
Yeah,
so many people go through the same things and it's painful. And that I think I know, I don't think that's, I got that from my grandfather, my
yeah,
mom's dad. One of my favorite sayings he would always say is, if you sit at a table and you put your problems on a table and you want to like go through like a group of people and you put your problems on the table and you look at everyone else's problems, you're 100% going to grab your own and walk away. You think other people's problems are bigger or smaller than yours, but it really, everyone's problems are just as big for them. And so that's why it's my mindset of like dealing with problems is always like, everyone's problems are big.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
happy Thursday.
happy Thursday.
I love my Thursdays with you.
Too.
No, we hope you all enjoy your Thursdays with us, or Friday or Saturday or whenever you end up listening
Yeah,
to this. Yeah.
okay.
We hope you enjoy our company just as much as we enjoy each other's, and have a great day.
Have a great day.
Bye.